Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you're new to this channel, or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support this channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they're live, and a PayPal link in the info box below the video once it's rendered. But most importantly, if you would like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the shape of the Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show. Sharing the show increases the live audience, of course, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel. So please share the show. And one last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are joined by a Plain Truth, or the Plain Truth, Ranty Flat Earth, Arwin, and Sleeping Warrior. How are you all?
I'm good.
Good afternoon. By the way, Nathan, before you start, I didn't get any notification whatsoever that this hangout started. Not even now. It's weird.
That's just one of those things. It's not always the case that you'll get a notification. So as a YouTuber, I've looked into this deeply, of course, and YouTube, even if you click the bell and say all notifications, they don't want to overload you if you've got several hundred subscribed channels on your list with stuff that may not necessarily be appropriate. So there is algorithms at play that won't share them. I know Math Powerland occasionally moans that the notifications haven't gone out, but he'll have done a succession of hangouts, like one after the next, maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes, then another one that's an hour. And they're not just going to keep notifying your subscribers. So that's another reason why I've split this show into two separate hours, so that if this doesn't get a notification out to whoever, the next one might. So there's a better chance, hey Mark, of getting...
It just popped up, by the way.
Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, good to have you. So yeah, that's why I do it
yeah.
in two shows as well. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily follow that if you've clicked all notifications, you will get all notifications.
It just popped up right now.
Timing.
2 minutes late.
Perfect timing. Excellent. Well, there's a good 100 people watching, so it's obviously some people know it's happening.
I think they're getting used to the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, they set their alarm clocks. It's like trolling duty. We have to quickly get on.
Well, straight to
We need
business.
to stop the flat Earth.
So this morning, Anthony was playing some of... whose hangout was it, Anthony?
Sean's.
Shawn Hubbard.
Sean
It was either
okay.
Sean's or Gio's.
It had whoever. You've got bits of it. I know Anthony's been working on it, editing it, and playing bits of it to me this morning. And these guys are idiots. You know, we're demanding that they apply perspective to their curve calculations, and they're calculating perspective after the fact and comparing and contrasting. And it seems clear that if it's Shawn that was making the point that Anthony was playing to me, I don't know who these guys' voices that well, but if it was Shawn that was talking, he's an idiot. He doesn't understand the point. And it's quite ironic, really, because Anthony's been saying there are going to be people out there stupid enough to not understand this. And unfortunately, Shawn, you're one of them. You know, you're clearly dumb, and you don't understand that what we are requiring you to do is actually apply perspective. And you're not doing that. You know, calculating it isn't applying it. So it's a fact. Things get smaller into the distance, and you need to account for that and then work out where it positions itself geographically. Or geometrically, my apologies. So you need to calculate out its angular size reduction and then where it sits geometrically. Not calculate where it sits geometrically and then say you can work out the angular size. You're an idiot.
Yeah. I think what I'll say at this point is that the reason why I did the disclaimer each time we've broached this topic is because I realized that even me and Nathan, when we're trying to talk about it between ourselves and we understand what we're trying to say, because there's no science for a flat Earth, it's really hard to convey the message to people that are on the same side, let alone people that are against us. And it has to be the case that we have the disclaimer again, because it is the case that these guys don't get the point that's being made, or they do get it and they're deliberately obfuscating that point to try and make it look like we're stupid, which is known as gaslighting. Now, ultimately, I don't blame anybody if you don't get it, because it's not easy to get your head round, because we're all brainwashed by the metabunk curve calculated bullshit. We're all looking at that orthographically side on, and we're all understanding it because it makes sense, right? It is logical. It does make logical sense. So what I'll do is, before I do any presentation on this, to make my point again, because it isn't being made, it isn't being met, the point isn't being addressed, I'll start with the disclaimer. It's fine if you don't understand this. Shawn's hangout last night with Reds is evidence that they don't get this point, or that they do get it and completely ignore it and obfuscate it anyway. If you don't get it and you stand up and say, hey, I don't quite get this at the minute, it needs to be further explained, that's because we're not doing our job properly, and I get that. We need somebody that can visualize this on screen so that we can show it, because at the minute it's difficult to describe with words that which we're trying to explain, because there is no science on a flat earth, right? It's all on a sphere, and it's all based around this metabunk thing. But on the other hand, if you're a protagonist on the ball earth side, I don't know how you guys can't understand this. I don't know how it's possible that Shawn doesn't get this, because his whole hangout last night was based on a straw man, effectively. A straw man that I did not make. He did a load of maths with GeoStreber and Reds, and they were calculating this and doing that, this, that, and the other, claiming that it was perspective, and then basically holding each other's willies while they all congratulated each other and said how brilliant that they all were and how stupid I was. And I'm like, guys, you're all based in this whole hangout on a point that I did not make. It's the antithesis of what the point that I'm making. It's the opposite argument. You guys either clearly don't get it, or you do get it and you're trying to straw man me and gaslight me and make me look stupid, which is fine. You know, I expect that. You are the ballers. But you're not addressing the point that's being made. And by not addressing that point, it's you're being either disingenuous or you're stupid. So if you lack the capacity to understand my point, then that's fine. But don't gaslight me and say that you're going to do a whole hangout and present that I'm stupid because derpa, derpa, derpa. There's the maths that proves it. When the maths that you're basing it on is based on a story or a point that I did not make. It's not difficult.
I would go
As an
with
object
stupid
goes in...
with whoever it was that was talking in that particular section that you snipped out, because it was Shawn, wasn't it? I am talking about Shawn, aren't I?
Yeah.
Shawn was saying it's not relevant, the angular size, when you're calculating the hidden. And then he went on to extract it out from the curve maths. And it's like, wow, you really are stupid. Because the angular size of anything you're looking at is absolutely relevant when you take a picture of it. And that's especially relevant when you have something in the foreground that's claimed to be blocking your view of it.
Yeah. So let's screen share, Nath. Oh, I am screen sharing. Let me know when it's being presented.
Europe.
Now, bear in mind that everybody on the panel in our panel now has not had this conversation. Me and Nathan have already had this conversation. So just everyone on the panel, just pipe down while we get this point made, and then at the end of it, conclude. Like join in at the end. But let us get the points across before they get challenged or criticised or agreed upon.
Before you start, can I say something?
Pardon?
Before you start, can I say something?
Feel free.
All right. I disagree with you. I think you're being dishonest.
Very funny. Anyway, can we get through this?
Go ahead.
So their whole hangout last night was based around this holding of Willie's circle jerk thing. But listen to what's actually said by Shawn in how he presents the point. Now, let me be clear, right? The disclaimer bit goes in now. If you don't get it, it's fine. This applies to Shawn. Shawn either doesn't get it or he is twisting it. So Reds then gets the perception of something that I didn't make, a point I didn't make, and the rest of the hangout then mathematically formulated as a result of this sentence. So there's only a minute and a half, and I think there's 4 comments in here by Shawn. Listen to what he says, and I'll split it into segments so that we can, like, me and Nathan can explain why this is not correct. And then hopefully by the end of it, people that are on the flat earth side will see that Shawn's being stupid and Reds was misled by Shawn as a result of it. And the whole hangout that they had 3 hours worth was based on Shawn misrepresenting or deceiving, one or the other. But either way, it was wrong. So let's hear what he says.
So moving on here, we'll see what he has to say about your 2-year-old video instead of addressing what was actually said last night.
Oh, goody. Can't fucking wait.
And there is no evidence of that in the metabunk curve calculator. It simply doesn't exist. Mick argues, of course, that it's because the function of metabunk is to show the hidden height, but it's the application of the hidden height that's the problem. So at that point, I'll just stop because I accept, Nathan accepts, we accept that metabunk stops at the hidden height, right? We're not saying that metabunk has to. We accept that metabunk doesn't have to, but we say that it should tell us that it isn't, because it does need to address perspective, either directly or indirectly, but it can't completely not address it. So we accept that metabunk isn't dealing with this, okay? We accept that. However, they should tell us that they're not dealing with it because it isn't being addressed. Now listen to what he says.
Again, the hidden height is all that calculator is meant to show.
Agreed.
If you want to take it the next step further to calculate angular sizes, you can.
Agreed.
However, to show the hidden height, the angular size is actually very unimportant.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's just play that last line again.
However, to show the hidden height, the angular size is actually very unimportant.
Now, what he's saying is he's now applying the what's the word? The angular reduction against the hidden height, and that's not my position. My position is the reduction in size doesn't apply to the hidden value. It applies to the target as a whole. So what he's focusing on here is the hidden value of it and then claiming that it's not important. And I agree with this point, and so does Reds. So let's see what he's pointing at the angular size thing is being he's pointing it in a different place to what I'm saying.
However, to show the hidden height, the angular size is actually very unimportant.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. You're looking in the wrong place, Shawn. I'm not saying that the angular size is relevant to the hidden height. I'm saying that the angular size is relevant to the target as a whole, not the hidden part of the target as a whole. Do you understand that, Shawn?
So basically, they're trying to make the law of perspective apply to a calculator that isn't designed to find the law of perspective.
Correct.
So Reds has now concluded that I'm trying to make perspective, the calculator, do something that it's not supposed to do. Now, I accept that it's not doing it. That's not contentious. But now, because of the way Shawn's presented that point, Reds now thinks that I'm on something totally different, and it forms the rest of the hangout. They spent 3 hours on this line of Shawn's that was not right. I'm not interested in the angular size of the hidden value. I'm interested in the angular size of the target. So he's moved the focus of the whole conversation to this element, and Reds now thinks something that's not what my position is, and it's just ridiculous.
Nice. Cool.
But here's the thing. They can apply to the law's perspective to find out what the angular size of that hidden height value is. It's not something that is needed to find the hidden height.
Right. So again, listen to what he's saying. He's saying you can apply perspective to the hidden height, but it's not something that you need to apply to. Listen to what he says.
Nice. Cool.
But here's the thing. They can apply to the law's perspective to find out what the angular size of that hidden height value is. It's not something that is needed to find the hidden height.
I'm not interested in this. This is not my point. I'm not interested in the hidden height and the angular size of the hidden height. I'm interested in the angular size of the target as a whole and what size that should be before you put the curve to it. So he's focusing on a part that's not even being. This is not my point. Shawn's either not got it or is deliberately putting the conversation elsewhere to not address the point that's being made. Claim that I'm stupid, and then they all agree with Shawn that I'm stupid. Well, it's all based on this bit that Shawn's derailed the conversation. The conversation they should be having is he wants perspective applying first, then applying the hidden to it. And it's that simple. If you're a flat earther, I think most people are getting this now. Even Dawn gets it. And if Dawn's getting it as a baller, either Shawn and co are not paying attention enough, they're not keeping up to date with the flat earth debate, and I know that they do watch, but they're either strawmanning and gaslighting, or they are thick, they lack the capacity to understand the point that's being made. But it gets worse.
Yeah, it's not a direct calculation. There is no direct connection between the two.
Reds is correct. There is no direct. Yeah, Reds is. I agree with Reds. Reds is on a tangent here, caused by Shawn that he doesn't realize he's on a tangent.
Yeah, well, can I
So
can I
basically,
hold on?
I'm gonna
Sorry,
go to a
Anthony. Can you just pause it?
calculator.
So, Anthony, just go back because I've just talked over that bit. Yes, there is no functionality possible in an actual size calculator. There isn't that functionality. It's basically an orthographic only calculation. It's not dealing with the angular size. That's the point. So when people laughed initially and Anthony said, no, you should be reducing that height value from 1,100 feet down to 40 feet because that's its angular size. Well, that's a nonsense because obviously the actual size of the target remains the same. It's just decreased relative to what you can see because of distance. But the angular size reduction isn't possible in the Metabunk calculation. It's a secondary function, and that secondary function needs to be applied to the thing you're targeting. So this straw man assessing the angular size of the hidden value that the Metabunk calculator spits out is a complete nonsense. The target isn't included in the calculation, so assessing where perspective comes into the calculation or where you can get perspective out of the calculation is totally erroneous. You guys need to apply an angular size reduction to the target that you are measuring in your calculation. So we need to see you actually apply perspective to the target and then calculate where it sits geometrically, not extract out any values from your calculation that relate to perspective, or calculate for perspective and then not actually include it, as we've seen done also. So guys, after the fact doesn't work. And not to disagree with Anthony, although it's slightly contrary to what he said in agreement with Shawn, was that angular size does have to be taken into consideration when working out the hidden amount. And I mean that in very real, all-encompassing terms. The hidden amount is how much is hidden of the target. So looking at the calculation only ignores the target. And when you go and get that target value, you go and get an actual size. Or in the case of what's on screen, they went and got a photo of it taken from very, very close. Well, obviously the angular size in this photo hasn't reduced with size at distance because it's taken very close up. But these guys are ignoring that function when they do their comparisons and start drawing their lines on a picture that isn't the photo being analysed. So you need to actually take into consideration the picture that is being analysed, and your calculator is not comparable to a viewing function. Why? Because it doesn't account for perspective. So if you choose to use that calculation, that's fine. Not that it's usable, because Red's just pointed it out. The two are mutually exclusive. You can't use an orthographic calculation to give you a perspective angular calculation. It's not that type of calculator. That relies on the user to observe that you see perspective and account for the fact that there is an angular size reduction at distance, and then apply that so we can see how much of your imaginary bulge gets in the way. Now the problem, and the reason they fight this, is because when they, if they, which they may not, actually apply the angular size reduction to the target at distance and then put it into the calculations, they are fucked completely and totally.
But it's not that you used a word then that they're ignoring it. I actually don't think Shawn even gets it, because I see him in chat right now saying, yeah, play the video and watch the maths that Geo does. Yeah, the maths that Geo does is based on a straw man, Shawn. It's not based on my point that I'm making. You're basing it on orthography, which is the antithesis of my point. You're actually changing my argument and then claiming that you've debunked me based on the antithesis of my argument, the opposite of my argument. You either don't get it, Shawn, or you deliberately deceive, and it's one or the other. And I don't think you get it. I really don't, because that whole hangout was based on a tangent that you put in there that was the antithesis of my point. Now, was it done intentionally? I don't think you even understand it, Shawn. I think you did it accidentally because you lack the capacity to understand the point that's being made. The target shrinks over distance. You don't apply the actual height of the target. You apply the shrunken height of the target at that distance, and you completely missed that point and then created a tangent which Reds was misled by and Geo calculated for, and then you all held each other's willies and said, idiot. No, you completely missed my point or don't understand it. It's one or the other. So I'll play this last part again because this just concludes it for me that Shawn doesn't get it.
So
However-
basically, I'm going to go to a calculator that's not designed to find angular size, and then bitch, that's not basically apples and oranges.
Right. So Reds realizes that what Shawn's just said is apples and oranges, and Reds is totally correct. But Shawn's just totally misrepresented my point. He's created the antithesis of my point, which is his point. But he's not addressing the point that I made.
But here's the thing: once you have that hidden height value, you actually have a height value to put into the angular size equation, which is the law of perspective.
Nathan, what do you think of that? What you just said?
It sounded like double speak. I mean, all that matters here is we need to see the application of perspective prior to the calculation for curvature, because both apply and one is absolutely in effect always. That's perspective. So to deny it, which the calculator does, it only accounts for orthographic view, and say in the aftermath I can calculate the hidden value from the calculation and then extract out the actual height, that still ignores the secondary function of perspective in the first place, because he's taking it from the calculation, i.e. the curve calcs, which don't include perspective. You haven't applied the secondary function to the target. You're still using the target based on its feet and inches value, which is a totally different concept. It's a totally different way of measuring things. It's an actual size, and that's not what we're seeing, and it's not what we're analysing. We're analysing the angular size, something your calculator is incapable of spitting out. So analysing the angular size representation in the calculation that you use is irrelevant. You need to actually apply it to the target.
So just responding to Kunrich in chat, he says, "Sorry, Anthony, but you don't get it. If you think the curve calculator gives the wrong answer, then prove this with maths, not talk. No, Kunrich, you don't get it. The curve calculator is doing the geometric curve of the sphere that we're supposed to live on. The geometric curve of the sphere that we're supposed to live on is correctly represented by the curve calculator. The issue's not the curve calculator. The issue is how it's being applied against the target in every single case ever done by any camera, by any flat earther, that's been dismissed by any ball earther. It's the application of the hidden that's the problem, not the curve calculator itself. It's the failure of the curve calc to tell us that objects in the distance are smaller than they appear, right? Or bigger than they appear.
Right.
So it's not me that's getting this wrong, gents. It's you guys.
It's anybody who's applied the calculation and compared the result it gives to a photograph. Because the photograph, it does all the work for you in terms of perspective. It already accounts for it in the picture. But the maths doesn't. We all know this. It's been confessed by the manufacturer of the maths, Mick West, who blamed the standard model for this. The value of R comes from the standard model. Your Earth model does not account for perspective. It's not a perspective drawing of something. It's just a geometric model. So it never accounts for perspective. That will never change. We have an admission and you all accept it on the ball side. Great. So we understand. The model, the maths, don't include perspective. That is a fact. So, to compare it to a photograph, you need to add a secondary function. As a user of that geometric calculation, you need to say the thing in my picture, not a different picture taken from very close up, the picture you're actually analysing, you need to apply a secondary function to the target in the picture where you make the calculation. Now, as Red points out, apples and oranges, you can't do that in a geometric calculation. Well, that's not our problem now, is it? You still need to take into account the perspective because it absolutely applies. You're just not actually applying it. So to wrap this up in terms of what we want from them, because when they come on, we'll bash them over the head with this. The fact they haven't ever applied the secondary function of perspective, the angular size reduction at distance. So to demonstrate that you are accounting for perspective, you need to show us actually apply a secondary function of the angular size reduction at distance and then apply that to your curve calcs, whatever those curve calcs may be, because you've got a bulge that's in the near foreground and has a larger angular size than the things in the distance. And the angular size of the target is absolutely affecting the hidden value. It's already got a hidden value, based on its angular size. So you definitely need to take it into effect before you start working how much you think your fantasy ball world has curvature. It doesn't. The only reason it has is because you've ignored perspective. Had you not ignored perspective, the world wouldn't look like the math says, because we don't have any curve. Ranty's shown this with his wind turbines. There's no x-axis curvature. There is only the angular size reduction at distance. And when you see it side on, there's no curve. But we definitely see them falling away, not because they're curving, because they fall away with perspective. So that function we definitely see and observe every time we take a picture must be accounted for first, not extracted from the maths afterwards.
Yeah, right.
I agree.
Nathan, technically, they don't ignore perspective because they do see it, but they disregard it in their calculation. They just
Precisely.
don't use it. They
So
do
let's
recognize
listen to
it's
this.
there, but they don't apply it in their calculation and think that is okay.
Yes, so we need to see the application of an angular size reduction at distance for the target prior to you applying any curve maths to figure out how much is actually being hidden by the bulge, something in the foreground with a larger angular size.
Hello, Chocolate.
Hey, Chocolate. We hear you.
So I've
And
only got
Spurs
one
Emo,
last
by
clip.
the way, is he?
We'll just
I
round
only
this
have
out,
one
Arwin and Chocolate.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yes,
we'll just get the pleasantries out of the way after Anthony's finished his
Right.
point, and then we can move on.
So
I only have one extra clip to play now, and then we can go back to normal services. And it's basically this last 30 seconds, last 10 seconds. Listen to what Shawn says, and then just laugh, because this is just completely the antithesis of what we're asking these guys to explain.
Yes,
And find out what the angular size of that hidden height is.
Mm-hmm.
It's something you do after you have a height of a target.
Right. So I think I don't think I did it in the right place. Let me just replay it.
You actually have a height value to put into the angular size equation, which is the law of perspective,
Yes,
and find out what the angular size of that hidden height is.
Mm-hmm.
It's something you do after you have a height of a target.
No, Shawn, it's something that you do before you do the maths, not
Yeah,
after.
you're figuring out how much
Before.
the angular size, what he calls the height, you can only have an actual value for a height of something. Its actual height, the feet and inches number on a tape measure when you're standing next to it. Well, that number is not relevant to an angular size when targeting something. So it's not something that you do after. You'd figure out how big it looks before.
Yeah. And I don't know, this is where I get this is where the disclaimer counts, because a lot of flat earthers are on the fence 50-50 with it, and I get it, it's fine. The ballers I don't even think get this, because I think Shawn falls into the I don't understand this, but I'm going to create a straw man and debunk that. But I think that if it was explained properly by Shawn at the time, that whole hangout would have been completely different. So I'll put it in its most concise terms so that Shawn understands it. And perhaps if you redid the hangout, Shawn, applying what I'm about to say, then come back to me with laughing at me, then maybe we are wrong. But at this point, Shawn, your whole hangout last night was based on a straw man that you created because you didn't get it or deceived the other two. Because as Red's correctly pointed out, it was apples and oranges. And it was apples and oranges because of you. You changed the point that I was making. So, for just Shawn, on a flat plane, objects get smaller with distance. End of sentence. On a sphere, objects get smaller with distance and drop behind a curve and tilt away from the observer, and a bulge magically appears before your very eyes. But it's at distance. It's not when it's right in front of you. So go and do that hangout again and do the maths again with the target at 30 miles away or whatever. In that case, I think it was 470 feet chimneys at 17 miles. Do it from 17 miles, Shawn. Not do it from when it's right in front of you like you had on screen. Do it from the 17 miles. Reduce that height of that target down, then put it behind the curve. And then, like Nathan says, it completely shits over all of your maths because it never matches then the curve. It'll match the curve calcs if you do it properly, but it'll never ever match any of the evidence that we can all present, because most of this stuff should be gone, because we're then seeing the curve relative to the thing that you're supposed to be obstructing it with. And right now we're not seeing no curve because it just so happens to be the case that the math seems to make a sphere ball earth look flat, and we didn't really know why it was. But it's like Taboo Conspiracy said in his video, they can't both be right. One of them must be wrong for some reason. And we've worked out that the reason is you guys are not putting perspective in before you do your geometric curve. You're putting it in after and you're comparing it, but you're not applying it. So apply it, then show us what happens. And it'll shit on every single argument. You'll never be able to explain all these observations that we're doing because all of them will be virtually gone, or if not gone.
Yeah,
I think they know this by now. I think
Yeah.
that, as I described in the hangout yesterday at the beginning, didn't know which one it was, but I described they realize that everything they believed in, that they relied upon with their calculator, is now being exposed. That the magician's trick is being exposed, and they're now basically trying to just get along with willful cognitive dissonance. They know, but they're trying to not figure it out on purpose. It's willful cognitive dissonance because it's just too hard. It's just too hard to admit that they lost a very important foundation.
Hello.
Hi, Tim.
Hey, Tim.
So
What's
what
up,
do you think,
Spurs?
Anthony? Willful cognitive dissonance?
I was just about to say Tim came at the right time because we hear this a lot. And I know, we have the answers, but we don't seem to hear the immediate response from a baller. So as you're saying, what you're saying, as we're saying what we're saying, there isn't usually a baller to defend this. So, but again, I do tend to agree. I think they do know, and they are just.
They know, but they can't let it shine through.
Oh, he's gone.
What'd you say?
He's gone, PMAS.
I kicked him.
Wasn't
It's
it?
just a fake one with a
Tim,
video.
Tim, can you make sense of this perspective thing on your side? If we've got it wrong.
Before you
wrong.
answer that question, hey Tim, optical slant.
Yeah, and cumulative curve.
Yeah.
And cumulative drop.
Oh yeah, that one.
Mhm.
Anyway, I kind of get what you guys are saying now. I don't think you're right in any way, really. But I'm kind of wondering, I guess Riley left right when I joined, or what?
No,
Oh,
he
Riley's
was
in
on
Skype.
Skype just so he could pass his audio through, but he'll join the hangout in a second.
He can hear you, Tim.
Oh, cool.
He's not on Skype
So
anymore.
I'm-
He's dropped. He'll be back
So
in
I'm
the hangout in
sharing
a
my
minute.
screen of observation that I've done now 6 times, and this time I definitely do not have as much inferior refraction or really any kind of refraction going on. They were quite clear. So I'm just wondering, like, how can we apply you guys' perspective basically to this image that is taken with the P900 at 2 foot off the water?
You don't
Just
need
kinda
to.
wondering.
Hey,
Well,
cool.
the answer to that is you don't need to. The picture does it automatically for you. It does all the hard work. It includes it automatically.
Okay, so it includes
Observation.
perspective.
Yes.
So there's no contention there. I'm trying to figure this out, really.
Sure. There's definitely
Uh,
perspective in the picture, but there's definitely not perspective in the curve calculator.
It's me.
Okay, yeah, I think that the contention here is that the globe side doesn't think that it needs to be, and then you guys think that it needs to be.
Yeah, sure. Well, like we've just established with the very first picture you've presented, we definitely have perspective in this picture. Unless you want to argue
Yeah,
that there's
I
not
agree.
perspective. So we're arguing about whether or not there's curvature, but we're definitely certain there's perspective, and yet you don't think it needs to be applied.
No, I think that's just the globe stance. But like, how would I guess
Sorry,
I'll
do you
ask
not
you,
think
how
we're on a
do I
globe?
apply...
Sorry, is your position changed? Do you not think we're on a globe, Tim?
No, I was just wondering, like, let's try to figure
Is
this
that a
out.
no,
So how
but
do I
no,
actually...
but you don't
So
think
you're
we're on a
on the
globe?
fence
Sorry,
now.
I just need some clarity to this. Has your position changed? Because you seem to be framing it like it's someone else's position. Do you think we live on a spinning sphere, Tim?
I definitely know it's a sphere, yes.
So this is your position then. your position and your maths that prove your spinning ball that are wrong and don't account for perspective, Tim. So this is your position. Okay?
Or your belief is that basically there is no accurate global calculation system out there, but despite all of that and the entire body of science, you still believe it's a globe. That could also be your position. So what is it, Tim?
I'm gonna put my neck out and just make a suggestion that I was thinking about as Nathan's immediate response to Tim's picture is the picture does everything for you, right? So what we have here are two different presentations, so that the curve calculator does not take into account perspective. Guess what the picture doesn't take into account? Curvature.
Right.
So both models leave out one thing, but the one
So
thing
I'm
that's
wondering,
left out.
how do I apply perspective to this picture? What is the equation for
You
perspective?
don't need to. I just explained this to you. This picture automatically has perspective applied to it. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to calculate it. We don't have to do a thing. If you choose to calculate something about the picture, then you automatically must account for perspective.
How do you go about accounting
No,
for,
no,
for
Tim, I
perspective?
think I've just
No,
got.
hold on, Spurs. I'm just asking Nathan. How do you go about accounting for perspective? How do you do that?
I don't know. And I don't care. That's not my problem.
And that's the point. Tim
Wait,
is
hold on.
asking-
Aren't you trying to prove? Hold on. Aren't you trying to prove a point, saying that you should account for perspective, but you don't know
No.
how to?
No.
Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not trying to prove a point. I know that every man, woman, and child watching this show knows that perspective is real and knows when I state as a fact that this picture does have perspective in it. That is a fact. I don't need to calculate anything. You need to incorporate that fact when you calculate how much you think the Earth is curving.
How do you do that?
I don't care. This isn't my problem. This is your problem. Like, that's why I established that this is your sphere belief and your calculation, not my calculation, not my problem. So why do you keep asking me about how I calculate perspective? I don't care. It's automatically done in the picture.
So you don't know the equation for perspective?
No, and I don't care. It's automatically a part of the picture. Were I to calculate anything, I would then take it into account. You are presupposing the value of R. When you presuppose that value, you exclude perspective, something that is definitely in this picture. So worrying about how I calculate it when I'm not calculating anything or telling the world it's a sphere using a calculation, that's not my problem. That's your problem.
Well, Nathan.
So just hold on, Arwin. So how do you calculate perspective, Tim? And once you've told me how you calculate it, show me where you incorporate it once you calculate out how much sphericity you believe we've got on our flat plane.
Well, it's 2 arctan times what, g to the over 2r, right?
Excellent.
You
Can you
sure?
show me where you've applied that calculation of this obvious
top of my
fact
head.
that we observe in this picture, that perspective? Can you show where you have applied that reduction in perspective to the targets that you input into the curve calculator? Can you show me that being applied, please, Tim?
I think you actually said yesterday, rightly so, that I never used the curve calculator.
We've just established that the curve calculator is your bullshit from your standard model that you believe in. So this is definitely your problem, whether or not you use this calculation or not. It's a calculation based on the standard model to prove how much curvature we see, and I assume you are putting this picture on screen because you are asserting that there is a bulge between us and these things we nice and clear picture. Wow, Tim, have you got more of these buildings? There seems to be even less curvature in this picture than the last one. This is an excellent flat Earth proof.
Nathan, by the way, sorry
So
to
this
be.
is actually an occasion where gaslighting would be applied. So Nathan or Anthony just butchered it a little bit ago. So you're basically trying to give me a reality that's absolutely false.
What, like one that doesn't include perspective? No, that wouldn't be us doing that. That would be your curve calcs that exclude perspective and don't tell you to apply the secondary function that we see in this picture.
I don't need curve calcs to show you this image where basically buildings are being obstructed by said flat water. So I just don't. How does that explain on a flat
Optical
Earth again?
slant.
Perspective.
No, hang on. There is an explanation there, Tim, which I'm sure you can discredit if you don't agree with me. Can you zoom in to the picture like you just had a second ago?
Let's see.
When when you had, I mean, it looked like to me that we could see trees, but maybe not. They weren't trees. Maybe there was something else. But just zoom in on the, between the buildings. And if you don't mind, Tim, would you mind dropping a copy of that picture in the side chat? Because to be honest, it's spectacular.
I gave these to Jeranism. I gave these to Globebusters. Bob.
That particular one, though.
Yeah, I'll give you the whole thing.
Now, with regards to, if you can zoom in a little bit there, in between them buildings.
Let me pull up Photoshop here.
Just so we can see more of them, because I see it quite small on my screen. Mind you, to be honest, the Hangout sees it big enough. I can see it on my Hangout screen.
So like here?
Yeah, just hold it there. Don't move it. Just keep it where it is.
Right.
With your mouse, can you move your mouse to where the black line is? Can you see there's like 3 black lines? The first and the second one are fainter than the third one.
This is just water waves, very, very light waves going on.
You're on the right line. That line there, and all of that obstruction above it is evidence of a Fata Brumosa mirage. Can you disprove that my position is that is not a Fata Brumosa mirage? And if so,
Easily.
how?
Let me show you right now. See their waves. That was pretty easy, dude.
What do you mean the waves? It's flat as a pancake. What are you talking about?
This right here.
I see several waves. So there is reason to assume that there is some obstruction
And just hold
at
it there.
the circle of
Press pause.
confusion
Press
by
pause.
the waves in front of it.
Press pause, Tim.
Okay.
Can you see on that the tab on the left of screen now? You've got that on the lower part. You've got 2 white bits. Then you've got the black line underneath, and then you've got a reflection of the white bits underneath it, and then the water starts. That's further evidence that there's a mirage in the picture.
Okay, does that explain why these buildings are being obstructed and all these buildings between here are being obstructed as well?
Do you know what a Fata Brumosa mirage is, Tim?
It's just more evidence and more examples of just atmospheric conditions.
No, Tim, it's where the water line gives an apparently high perception because the water below is being miraged on top of itself.
How is it being miraged and it's not atmospheric conditions in any way?
Just look at Fata Brumosa and then tell me that that's not consistent with it.
It has nothing to do with atmospheric conditions, you're saying?
No, he's
No,
not
what
denying
I'm saying
it.
is that in your photo, you've got evidence of a Fata Brumosa mirage, which is
So
the
does it
water.
have anything to do with atmospheric conditions? Because you just
Yeah.
said no. So
No,
okay.
it is caused by atmospherics, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, you just denied me when I said that. So okay.
No, he didn't. No, he
Yeah, you
didn't.
did.
So just
Rewind
look into a Fata
documented.
Brumosa mirage, and then if you think that I've got it wrong there with my interpretation, perhaps you could counter it with a reason for why it's not. Because I see evidence that supports it being a Fata Brumosa, namely the black line underneath that it's appearing that is the mirage is being formed from.
So this building here sits on hundreds of feet of basically a hill, and I've evidenced that later in this series here. But I'm just wondering, like with your whole perspective argument, basically I'm at the same position, but I just higher the camera, so the altitude is different, and so you start to see more.
But you get
Is
a
this
better,
like how do you
get a
account
better-
for this?
Sorry.
There's
get
less obstruction from
you
the
get a
waves.
better viewing angle. So
I would say, can you show us what it looked like before and show us what it looked like after?
So this is at 25 feet right here, so you can see quite a bit more. And then I was trying to go below basically the dirty. And so this is 5 feet here.
So you're at 5 feet above the surface level. That means that everything between you and whatever it is, 16, 17 miles away, you have to condense 5 feet into the entire 50% bottom half of this picture. And that causes stuff to get compressed.
So you're saying this building isn't being compressed, but like its whole other like base is being compressed and then like hidden by water?
Exactly. Well, when Arwin calls this the optical slant, it seems like, right, you're telling us that between you, if we are to assume that we have got a direct line of sight with that building, the 50% picture below that building is representing 5 feet of elevation, whereas the mountain, well, it's absolutely enormous. So you've got a massive viewing angle with the stuff at the top, but you've got 5 feet of viewing angle with the 50% of the bottom half of the image. That causes compression by the very nature of how a lens works. Your viewing angle to the bottom half of this picture is tiny. Your viewing angle to the mountain is astronomically enormous by comparison. You haven't got 5 foot of mountain above, you haven't got 5 foot above that building. You've got thousands of feet. But below where your mouse is now, that represents 5 feet of viewing angle.
Okay, this mountain is absolutely ginormous. But I'm just wondering, like, on what you guys think, like, about this whole question here. This is from 2 foot off the water. Actually,
Right, so-
probably about 1.5 feet. So I'm just wondering if I shot a laser, right, at 2 foot, where this basically this tangent line is looking at this building right here, would the laser hit the bottom of the building, or would it hit near to the top of the building?
Right,
I think you could aim a laser at
Arwin,
the
let me get it.
actual horizon, at the water, and it would hit the building.
Arwin, let me have this. Tim,
No,
did you
no,
see
just
this?
think about it. You could aim it at the water because it's not actually there.
Tim,
That's part of the circle of confusion mirage.
keep
Go
that
ahead,
screen on.
Anthony.
Keep it on screen.
Uh,
Tim.
This one?
No, the one that you were just on. Then just zoom back. Right.
I think
Do
I
you,
was.
see the, do you see the very thin but dark blue line? It's just below. It's where you would imagine the shore would be. Yeah, that the thin dark blue line. Yeah, just below that. Just below.
Right here? Or like right here?
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
one. The one. Yeah, that one there. That is where it appears in your picture. There appears to be the Fata Brumosa Mirage. Now, what I'd like to know is how far were these buildings, and let's see whether or not any of them should be seen, because they do look pretty far away, Tim.
This is a 26-mile observation. I'm surprised you haven't been over to my channel where I outline all this.
You
and
have, you've
Ranty was
outlined-
there just
you
not too
have.
long ago as well.
You've outlined this for us on this show. So, we're all I hope we're all very grateful for your efforts, because these are amazing pictures.
So, Nath, would you mind sharing my screen, Nath, if I present something?
Sure. I don't know, before you do though, because Tim's on now. Oh, he's on to buffaloes and shit.
Yeah,
so
I want to
think he's
respond to Tim.
finished. I think that's all he's got, because he's shown us nice wildlife.
Oh,
No, I wanted to actually show the when I went on to Antelope Island, and you can actually see how much is missing of these buildings and how much is in between these buildings.
No, it's not. You're now showing a completely different vantage point. So now, are you telling me that but the whole point is now the viewing angle of what you've got in the bottom 50% of this picture isn't representing 5 foot anymore, is it? You're higher up and closer to the target. So we're now defying perspective to make your comparison. That's the point. You've changed your viewing position and got closer and higher, completely changing the angles. Yeah? And we're talking about angular size reductions at distance. So by changing your physical position with this photograph and changing your elevation, you've completely altered your viewing angle and the angular size reduction at distance, and you're no longer representing 5 foot of elevation in the bottom half of the picture. You're probably representing, I don't know, however high you are, 300 feet of elevation, presumably, half a mile, 2 miles. It's totally different kettle of fish, but the calculations only take a single line, and then your calculation for the actual amount you use, you get from Wiki. How high is this building? What does Wiki say? Well, that's not a relative term. It's not relative to your viewing position. It's not relative to your viewing angle. All stuff that gets ignored in the calculation, because you must, because you've got to engineer in curve. And when you're looking at your other pictures at 26 miles, you're representing 5 foot in 50% of the picture.
Nath, could you present my screen?
So is a 1,000-foot building, does it get smaller as you increase in distance looking at it?
Are you serious? Ask your question again. I won't answer.
So a 1,000-foot building, does it get smaller as you get further away from it, looking at it?
No, you back further and further away and magically it stays the exact same size. No, of course it gets smaller. The angular size reduces with distance. That's perspective. I can't believe my ears. Are you actually turning into a perspective denier, Tim? You're asking a question that's so blatantly obvious. It seems bizarre that you would ask me if stuff gets smaller in the distance.
I didn't actually ask you. I actually said it very specifically. I said a 1,000-foot building. Does it get smaller as you?
And I've already said we're not talking about these feet and inches terms. They're not quantifiable. They're only quantifiable to your orthographic world. Yeah, because it doesn't take into account an angle. 1,000 foot is always 1,000 foot. Yeah, so you're using terms that are nonsensical to an angle. Yeah, 1,000 foot's not an angle.
I wasn't
Tim.
talking about angles.
We are. Perspective requires angular size measurements, something you ignore. Okay, Tim? You're ignoring the angle and then asking us to do things in feet.
I'm using a zoom camera, dude.
Yeah, you just.
So why would I be
silly.
messing with angular size?
You don't have to. The picture does all
What
the
does
work
that have to do
for
with
you.
anything?
You would, though, if you were making any mathematical comparison. But you don't do that in your
I'm
maths. No, I know you're not, because you're not claiming anything here. You're just making an argument from incredulity
showing you
without
guys
backing it up
images.
with anything. We know
how
that.
water is obstructing buildings from 26
really?
miles
We've
away.
just
That's all I
explained
did.
perspective. I've just explained it in detail. You haven't acknowledged anything, not a single word I've said. You went silent on a couple of occasions when there was very tricky questions. Now you're asking the same question again.
When did I go silent?
We've just literally gone through this with you, Tim. Literally just
did I go silent?
gone through it with us. Yeah?
After I explained how it works.
Know what the equation for perspective was?
I don't need to.
Can I make 2 points, Nath? But I need a screen share.
Yeah, I'm trying to find your window. Give me a sec.
Well, whilst you're doing that, let me
go
address
ahead.
the-
You're on a screen share.
Yeah. Are we on?
Stop.
Are we on?
Yeah. Yes.
Right. So, at 26 miles, Tim, what was your lowest elevation that you where it was all blocked by water?
I muted 2 feet.
So 2 feet blocked by water. So what we're seeing, according to the geometric curve of the Earth, without any atmosphere, there should be nearly 400 feet of obstruction, of hidden. But we're seeing how much? How tall are those buildings? About 400 feet.
Pretty high. The Capitol building is actually about 300 or more feet above the water level.
So you're telling me
About
that
320.
even without accounting for perspective, we shouldn't see any of these buildings, Tim? According to your mathematics that assumes R and excludes perspective, even by their standards, we're giving you the best
No,
fighting
actually, I've
chance
worked it
possible.
out,
We
and
shouldn't
it
see
works
these
out
buildings.
quite well, actually.
But did you not just listen to what he just said to you? Even given no account for perspective, yeah, you still shouldn't see these buildings at all, but we do, according to your geometric maths.
Will you guys correct me? Can you account for perspective, Riley, please?
We
Thank
don't
you.
need to. We aren't making any mathematical equations here. You have a calculation that tells the world they live on a sphere. You have that, and you use it as proof. So we are saying...
When did I use it?
Well, we've just done it for you. You said you lived on a sphere.
Oh, so you're using it.
No, you're using it. You told us that you lived on a sphere. So there's a standard calculation. The topic of our conversation here is the calculations you use. Now, if you say, I don't physically go to this website, we'll do it for you because you think you live on a sphere. So we'll do those calculations for you.
I know I do.
He knows.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
You
if
know
you
that
use
we're on
something else,
Earth?
Tim, why don't you present what you actually
Well,
use?
hang on. Just I want to make my second point with regards to the maths. I see. Let's just be clear. Who is supposed to be doing the maths here? Okay. The assertion is that we live on a sphere, and that perspective is. We're saying that perspective is not being taken into account. We're asking why it doesn't get addressed, and the argument is, well, Metabunk's curve calculator is not. It's not designed to deal with that. Okay, we accept that point. But does that mean that we then don't have to consider perspective at all?
Of course not.
Now, the point we're making is that you guys are not applying perspective. So is the burden with us to say, here, this is the maths that you should be applying? Or is the burden with you to say, actually, yeah, he is right. We need to apply perspective. And this is what we're doing about it.
Anthony, how do you apply perspective?
That's not
It's-
our
but
problem.
hang on.
That's his
Close
point.
your
Oh, you guys don't
Tim.
know.
Tim, we don't need to know a formula for your calculation when you assert the Earth is a
I
sphere.
don't even know.
We don't need to know. We don't need to.
We don't need to know.
No.
Let me deal with that, Tim.
Picture
Let me
does
deal with
all
that.
the work for you,
Oh,
Tim.
God. How sad.
So is this the best you've got, Tim? So rather than coming here and showing that you have actually accounted for perspective, you've asked me the question, do objects in the distance get smaller? Because you're an idiot and a perspective denier. Now you're laughing at the fact that I couldn't give a toss how the mathematics work for perspective. I'm not trying to fool the world into belief of a sphere using mathematics when comparing to pictures. You are.
I'm sure I'm muted right now because that's what you do.
No.
So
you're not.
anyway, you've been
No,
talking
you're
about
not.
it for 2 weeks, so I think
Stop
you do
trolling
give
us,
it.
Tim.
No, you're just
I
trolling,
think you do
Tim.
give it.
You're just trolling. Not being muted.
No, you don't
I'm making
know.
a
You
point.
don't know how to account for perspective, but you're
We
telling
don't
everybody else.
need
to.
to.
How
I've just
hypocritical
told you
is
this
that?
is your calculation. You've come in and said that you don't need to because you don't need them and you don't use them. But these are the calculations presented to the world claiming that they live on a sphere. We are attacking those maths and saying that you don't include perspective. Now, you can either show us where people have included perspective or you can try and deny it and claim that we have to calculate it. We do not.
Tim, let me address the math side of it and who's supposed to do what. Are you listening?
Yeah, I'm smoking. Go ahead.
All right. So you guys, according to Reds and Shawn and all these, that this is supposed to be what we should be applying according to what you guys tell us. So on the hangout that Shawn did last night, they were making big deals about this equation, 2 arctan G 2 over 2R. This is what Mick West told me. This is what he sent to me was for the perspective, which, as you can see, is clearly a different formula. Now, my question isn't. This is a semantic. This is what's the word? A rhetorical question. I'm not asking for an answer. My question rhetorically is, why is there a difference between the two? Because on the one hand, I've got Mick saying it's this. On the other hand, I've got you guys saying it's that. And the point is, I don't really care what it is. My point is, it's not being applied. So it's not down to me to tell you what the perspective maths is, because I've got Mick saying one, I've got Red saying the other, and I don't care who's wrong. I don't care if they're both right in a different perspective, but the point is it's not being applied regardless of whether you're both right, both wrong, or one of you is right. Now, and it's not for me to tell you the maths. I don't care what the maths is. I don't care whether they get applied incorrectly or not. What I care about is whether they're being applied at all, and it's clear that they're not being applied. So, the maths. Let's see the maths, please.
And with that, I'm going to say first and foremost, a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of the live audience for tuning in and hopefully sharing this debate. And of course, a massive thank you to all of the live audience for tuning in and sharing this debate. So I tuned in while my kid climbed all over me. And a massive thank you to the debating panel for making this debate possible. Hopefully I've thanked all the right people in that little spiel. If you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe, and if you hated the show, you know what to do, but hopefully you'll like it and share it with a friend if not. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!